What if I told you that one sentence from President Donald J. Trump just made Congress nervous, Wall Street furious, and credit card companies quietly start changing the rules, and most Americans still have no idea what's coming? Well, this is because it's not about politics. It's not even really about interest rates. This is about the moment that President Trump touched the one lever nobody in Washington was supposed to touch: credit card interest. And suddenly names like American Express, Visa, MasterCard, and even Discover Card, they had to rethink how they were going to make money off your paycheck.
Right, President Trump is pushing to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. It's unclear exactly how he would do that.
Josh.
Thank you. The president has called on credit card companies to lower the cap rate to 10% effective the 20th next week. If they don't do that, what's his... what'll he do? What's the threat?
Well, tariffs? No, I'm just kidding. The president certainly has an expectation, Josh, that the credit card companies will do this, just as he did with the pharmaceutical companies, that they will lower costs for American consumers. I don't have a specific consequence to outline for you, but certainly this is an expectation and, frankly, a demand that the president has made.
And there are debates about whether it's good policy and could hurt the very people it is intended to help. Nevertheless, it is a proposal that is out there that is generating a great deal of interest. With us now, CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton. When I say it's generating interest, Harry, how much?
It is generating a ton of interest, John Berman. I mean, just take a look here. Google searches for credit card rate cap up 3,200% versus a year ago, up like a rocket. In every single poll that I have looked at, it's an extremely popular policy. And therefore, I'm not sure about the policy, but it is great at this point, great politics.
Yeah, maybe the victory for him is merely talking about it, whether or not it goes through. Why? Why do you think there's so much interest in this?
Why is there so much interest in this? Why do I say it's great politics? Well, take a look here. How Americans feel. Credit card debt is a stress in my life. Look at this. You get the majority of Americans, 55% say credit card debt is a stress in my life. More than that, where cost of living ranks on terms of the top issues in terms of what's affecting you and your family, it is number one in poll after poll after poll. So when you see this, you see a majority of Americans saying credit card debt is a stress in my life, and you see that ranking number one, cost of living in terms of the top issues. That is why there's so much interest in something that I think a lot of Americans think can address the very issue that they feel is numero uno, and that is the cost of living.
Well, they cheered at first. 10% sounds fair, right? Until banks started making their move, until Speaker Mike Johnson started hesitating, until Wall Street realized that this wasn't a headline. This was a threat to the entire consumer credit machine. Well, here's the part that really hits home. If you've ever carried a balance, if you've ever felt like your payment didn't matter, if you've ever wondered why prices keep on rising, but your breathing room keeps shrinking, this affects you. And I've got a surprise for you about midway toward the end of the video, you're really going to really appreciate, because the United States economy does not run on savings. It runs on your access to debt, believe it or not. And when Trump pulled that lever, he didn't just expose credit cards. No. He exposed the weakest link holding the whole system together. Now, stick with me, guys, because once you see how this really works, you're never going to look at easy credit the same way again. Be sure to drop a like for the video, and it is totally free to subscribe to the channel. All right, so this is the lever no one was supposed to touch. Now, for decades, every administration danced around it because, well, credit card interest isn't just a consumer issue. It is the profit engine of modern consumer finance. This is how they keep everyone financial slaves. So when Donald J. Trump floated a 10% cap, it wasn't symbolic, it was structural. Was it tied to tithing? I don't know about that, but credit cards quietly prop up spending, retail sales, and even tax revenue by letting Americans buy today and worry about it later. This is why no president before Trump went here, not because they didn't know it was broken, but because touching it risks slowing the entire consumer machine down. Now, this particular lever survived every crisis because it was politically radioactive. Well, Trump didn't care. He wasn't scared of those guys. Trump didn't tweak the system. He challenged the rule everyone agreed not to challenge. That easy credit must always stay easy, no matter the cost. And so here's the part most people never learn. Credit cards are not designed like normal products. They're risk engines. Companies like American Express and Visa, MasterCard, even Discover, they don't make their real money from disciplined users who pay off their balances on time every month. They make their money from people who don't. High APRs are not rewards, they're subsidies. They exist to offset missed payments, defaults, and reckless borrowing. One borrower who's paying 25% covers multiple bad bets elsewhere. That is the math. Now, if you cut the rate to 10% and the math changes instantly, suddenly risky customers are not profitable. The system was not built to help people behave better. It was built to price bad behavior aggressively. And this is where a lot of people kind of start feeling it in real life, not in theory. You know how this goes. Everyone assumes that they're fine right up until someone compares notes. Same doctor, same prescriptions, same Medicare year, and then suddenly one person realizes they paid hundreds of dollars more for the same coverage. Now that moment is rather uncomfortable because it means that the system didn't change, you just didn't check. Now, most people don't want to find out after the damage is done. They check their Medicare coverage before the year locks them in. And this is why so many people are already calling the phone number at the bottom of your screen right there, 909-563-8279, or they're clicking the link down below to go to askchapter.org/Ron right now to check and review their options with Chapter. And of course, it's totally free. There's no pressure. There's no sales pitch, just free information, clarity before overpaying becomes permanent. All right, so let's get back to what this credit card cap really sets in motion. Now, I want you to watch who moves first, okay? This tells you who's scared. Long before Congress scheduled hearings or cable news picked sides, Wall Street reacted. Now, this is because markets don't wait for laws. They price risk the moment uncertainty appears, okay? Now, Wall Street traders don't fear regulation nearly as much as they fear not knowing where the floor is. So a 10% cap threatens a core assumption baked into credit card models, earnings forecasts, even consumer spending projections. So if revolving credit slows down, retail slows. If retail slows, well, earnings miss. Wall Street saw the chain reaction immediately. This is why you saw nervous repositioning, cautious language from banks, and quiet scenario modeling. Congress debates, markets calculate. And when markets move before politicians speak, this means that the math changed before the law did.
How partisan of an issue has credit card debt become?
Yeah, okay. So this is another reason why I think this is great politics is, oftentimes we see issues that divide Americans, liberals and Democrats on one side, conservatives and Republicans on the other. But take a look here. Percentage with credit card debt, 49% of Democrats, 48% of independents, and 51% of Republicans. It is a bipartisan problem in this country. So all of a sudden, Donald Trump is saying, hey, let me find an issue in which I can unite the different factions in this country behind something that I am trying to propose here. This is it, baby. This is an issue that unites Democrats, independents, and Republicans, because the percentage with the credit card debt amongst Republicans, independents, and Democrats is pretty much gosh darn equal.
Well, what are the chances, though, that there is actually a cap based on people betting on it?
Yeah, okay. So essentially you see this, you see it's good politics, right? You see, of course, that the Google searches are way, way up. But in terms of the chance that it actually happens, chance the federal government this year caps credit card rates, at this point, the Kalshi prediction market has it at only a 33% chance. So good politics talking about it, but actually getting it accomplished, that I think is a little bit tougher to do, and the prediction markets agree on that.
Yeah, it's not nothing. 33% is not nothing. However, it may be more about the discussion, more about the proposal than actually passing.
Correct. We'll see what happens, because politics these days always surprises me.
Harold.
Now, this is not left versus right. It's old rules versus new reality. So when Mike Johnson hesitated publicly, this exposed a deeper fracture inside the Republican Party. One side still clings to free market orthodoxy. Never touch price controls, never cap returns, never interfere. Now, the other side, increasingly aligned with President Donald J. Trump, they see a system that rewards leverage over labor and debt over discipline. Now, Mike Johnson's caution wasn't rebellion, it was institutional reflex. Congress has lived inside the financial architecture for decades. Trump is not trying to fine-tune it. He's changing its assumptions. And that's what makes traditional conservatives a little uncomfortable, because once you admit the system is distorted, you're forced to decide who it should actually serve, capital or citizens. They changed the words so that they wouldn't have to answer the question. The moment Trump floated the 10% cap, critics slapped the socialist label on it and walked away as if that ended the discussion. They thought it was a mic drop moment. But I want you to notice what didn't happen. Nobody argued the math. Nobody explained why charging 25% interest on a struggling family is somehow a moral necessity. Labels became a shield. Calling it socialism avoids admitting something uncomfortable, that the system only works because enough people stay trapped in debt long enough to subsidize everyone else. So this is not about government control. This is about whether unlimited interest is the only way consumer finance can function. When the argument turns into name calling, it's usually because the numbers are not on your side. Now, this is where the system starts to crack. At 25% interest, companies like American Express and Discover, they can afford to make mistakes. High returns cover defaults, late payments, and risky borrowers. But at 10%, well, that cushion disappears. Subprime lending only exists above certain APR thresholds. Below that, the risk simply isn't worth it. So, banks don't adapt by being nicer, they adapt by being stricter. Credit scores matter more. Limits shrink. Approvals vanish. Now, on paper, the cap looks like relief. In practice, it forces lenders to choose between profitability and access. And when forced to choose, banks always protect their balance sheets first. And this is where a lot of people quietly stall out. There's this frustration that doesn't get talked about enough. Trying to figure out income alone, late nights watching videos, conflicting advice, half-built ideas that never quite connect, and you just keep on thinking to yourself, someone has to have already solved this, right? And that isolation is expensive. Trying to figure it out alone, it costs time, it kills your confidence, and it drains momentum right when you need it the most. This is why Flywheel Income Society exists. It's not hype, it's not promises. This is a long-term room built around recurring income, systems, and compounding, where conversations actually move forward instead of spinning in circles. You don't need guarantees, you need a better room. All right, now, if you're interested in joining the Flywheel Income Society, click the link down below and join me over there right now. All right, so let's get back to what actually happens after the math breaks, because that's when the real pressure shows up. So help on paper, pain in practice. When banks tighten credit, the shock doesn't come from interest rates. It actually comes from access disappearing overnight. The first people cut off are not reckless spenders. They're marginal borrowers living on thin margins. Credit limits get lowered. Credit cards stop renewing. Applications get denied with no explanation. This is predictable because lenders don't wait for defaults. They preempt them. Now, the irony is brutal here. The very people that the cap is meant to protect feel the squeeze first. Spending slows down not because people suddenly got responsible, but because the system won't let them participate anymore. That's when the layoffs follow. That's right, guys. Layoffs will follow. Retail feels it. Service jobs feel it. Credit doesn't retreat politely, it snaps back. And when it does, the economy doesn't gently cool, it jolts. So this looks like compliance until you read the fine print. When Built rolled out a 10% APR card, headlines framed it as proof of the market adapting. But Built didn't rewrite the system. It carved out a niche. Promotional rates, selective underwriting, limited exposure. That's not defiance, it's positioning. Fintechs can cherry pick safer users and still look generous. Legacy banks, they can't afford to do that. The Built move signals something important. Low rates are possible, just not for everybody. That's the future that this cap accelerates. Not universal relief, but segmented credit. So if you're safe, you'll get better terms. And if you're risky, well, you'll get shut out entirely. That's adaptation, not reform. So this is the weakest link in the entire system. The United States does not run on savings or wages. It runs on revolving credit. People don't spend based on what's in their bank account. They spend based on what their credit card lets them access. And this is why GDP doesn't fall when wages stagnate. It falls when borrowing slows down. Credit cards quietly fill the gap between income and lifestyle. Now, if you remove or restrict that bridge, spending drops real fast. This is why policymakers panic at the idea of credit tightening. Not because it hurts banks, but because it exposes how fragile demand really is. And so once borrowing slows down, the illusion of constant growth breaks, and the economy has to confront what it's really actually built on. Now, somebody always pays. The question is who, though? Investors lose when spending slows down. Banks lose when margins shrink. But consumers lose the most when debt quietly compounds unchecked. The 10% cap doesn't hurt disciplined borrowers, it protects them. It hurts marginal borrowers in the short term by limiting access, but it may save them long term from compounding traps that destroy families for decades. So this is really the uncomfortable trade-off that no one wants to say out loud. Easy credit feels compassionate, but it often locks people into permanent fragility. Pain now versus pain forever. The system has always chosen the latter because it just keeps money moving. Trump's proposal forces the opposite question. Is temporary restriction better than permanent dependence? That's the real fight hiding underneath the headlines. Now, they told you that this was strength. This was leverage. Now, for years, growth has been measured by how much people spend, not how much or how well they're doing financially. Consumption became the scoreboard and debt became the fuel. Now, when people swipe more, stocks rise, earnings beat, and headlines celebrate resilience. But none of that asks whether the spending came from income or interest. Debt masquerading as growth is convenient because it delays the reckoning. It feels painless until it isn't. The 10% cap threatens that illusion by slowing the engine that turns borrowing into prosperity. If growth fades when interest rates fall, that tells you something uncomfortable. The economy wasn't expanding on productivity, it was expanding on permission to borrow. And once that permission tightens, well, the truth surfaces real fast. So this is not about credit cards. It's really about what kind of economy survives. Donald J. Trump is forcing a reckoning, one that no administration wanted to own before his. The bet is simple, but it's risky. Accept controlled pain now or keep inflating a system that ultimately collapses later. Cooling means fewer approvals, slower spending, and louder complaints. Euphoria means silence, right up until it breaks. So President Trump's move doesn't guarantee stability. It tests whether the country can actually tolerate discipline over dopamine. And this is why Congress flinched and Wall Street panicked. Because once you admit debt isn't growth, you have to rebuild on sturdier ground. And rebuilding always hurts more than pretending like everything's fine. The question isn't whether it's causing pain, it's whether the pain finally leads somewhere better. If you made it this far in the video, drop a like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.